What is up, guys? It's Mega Man Chief Fan here. Welcome back to another comic book review. Now today, I'm going to be reviewing one of the most successful comics of the 21st century, or at least one of the most popular, and that is Saga. Easily one of the best ongoing comics. I mean, seriously, this is unbelievable. The first volume wasn't amazing, like some people said. It was definitely great, but it wasn't a masterpiece, but Volume 2 was a masterpiece. I don't care what anybody says, this series is getting better and better as I read through it. So, that's what I'm here to do. Explain why I think it's such an unbelievable series. So, let's get started. And you know what that means? It's premise time! So, our story takes place in a universe where two different planets are at constant war with each other. Now, no matter how long they're in peace, or how long of a time they're in peace, or how long of a period they just stop fighting, they will eventually start fighting again. Enter our two main characters, a young woman named Alana and a young man named Marco, who fall in love despite each other being on different sides. Alana is a former bodyguard who betrayed her side in order to make let Marco escape, because she fell in love with him while guarding him. So, the story begins with them having a child. Yeah, that's kind of weird to just hop right into that, but trust me, it's handled very well. And right as she gives birth, a huge, like a team comes in and starts firing at them, or two different sides start firing at each other with Alana, Marco, and their baby, which they named Hazel, in the middle. And after they get out alive, I'm not going to explain how they get out alive, because to be honest, that's one of the problems with this book. It doesn't explain things perfectly, but they escape alive. But after escaping, they go into a forest where another battle is happening. So they try to sneak around it and try to get off the planet, which is pretty much what the first volume is. And really, that's the premise. Now, the premise is great. It's not Full Metal Alchemist levels of great premises, but it definitely is a really, really good premise. And I was really excited to get into this book, because for the longest time, I was staying away from this book for some reason. I don't know, there was just something about it that just turned me off for a while, but then once it, turned me towards it, it just hooked me right in. So, first, let's talk about what hooked me in, the positives. Now, before I talk about the story and characters, which are the two main factors of a series, let me talk about the artwork. The artwork is unbelievable. This is one of my favorite things in the series, if not my favorite thing. Really, this is unbelievable art. Fiona Staples, if you're somehow watching this video, you should be proud of yourself. This is some of the greatest art I've seen in comics. And I know they keep bringing that term up, but I'm serious this time. This is some of the greatest art I've seen in comics. It has a very scratchy style to it, but it's a lot cleaner than something you see from like Jeff Lemire or Paul Pope. It's definitely more straightforward and doesn't try to confuse you, which Saga does pretty well with. And speaking of that, Saga is not pretentious in the slightest. The writing and storytelling is fantastic. It brings a lot of unique elements to it, like there's a whole ton of like mystical creatures that don't really exist, duh. And there's a whole ton of things that don't exist in our world, but they're made in a way where you can believe that they will exist one day, or they already exist, but they're just out there and we can't reach them yet. And I love stories that can do that. Just bring you to a universe you cannot believe can exist. And really, this did it for me. I could not have thought of this universe in 100 million years. This is unbelievable. Now, the story itself. I just talked about the writing. Let's get to the story itself. If the art isn't the best thing about this series, then it's the story. The story is just great. It's unbelievable, fantastic, amazing. You can add as many adjectives to this story as possible, or positive adjectives, and they would still fit. This is a fantastic fantastic story. Now, the story is pretty much set up in like a large epic, and I love epics, especially ones that are like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. But Saga reminds me a lot more of Star Wars more than anything, but I'm gonna get a lot of people hating me here. I'm not that big a fan of Star Wars. I like the original trilogy, or at least I admire them as good movies, but the prequels are horrible. Even the original trilogy, while I do think they're good movies, they're still overrated. They're really overrated, and but this is not overrated in the slightest. I think this deserves all the hype that it gets, or at least what the comic industry is giving it. Because Saga's story is infinitely better than Star Wars. Or at least it seems better right now, because Star Wars' story has been around for almost 40 years, while this story has only been around for like 3 years. It has its similarities with Star Wars, but it's entirely different from Star Wars as well. So, it just kind of reminds me of Star Wars now and then while I'm reading it. Like, oh, this reminds me of Star Wars. Like, there's this, like, corrupt government that's wanting to, that exists in the book, and that kind of reminds me of the Empire. I'm like, this reminds me of the Empire from Star Wars. And, there's a whole ton of other things that just, represent a whole ton of things from Star Wars. And, now, unlike other things that completely rip off Star Wars, this, while it kind of share elements here and there, it's not a ripoff whatsoever. It's completely original, and some of the things you'll see in this series is just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And some of the most unique things in the series are the characters. My favorite character, by far, is Alana. I love this girl. Not what you guys think, but as a character, she is amazing. She's the rebellious type and tries to do things herself. She's the perfect example of a strong female protagonist. She's a lot better than some other female characters I've seen in other mediums. And she just brings... And she wants to show her child the universe. That is an exact line from, like, the first issue of the book. She wants to show her child the universe, and that line just has been imprinted in my head. And mainly, that's the thing she does for me. She leaves an impact on me, which I love. This is a fantastic character, and I can't wait to see where she goes with Volume 3 and on, because I've only read the first 2 volumes. Now, Marco, he's one of the weaker things in this series. He's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, actually, he's a really well-developed character, and he's kind of likable. But man, compared to Alana, he's kind of weak in comparison. He is a lot more forceful. He likes to take instructions, and he's more of a follower more than a leader. And that's just, I don't know, that just kind of bugs me a bit, because he's kind of the strong example of a follower, and that's just, I don't think that's strong. But the child really hasn't made a personality yet, so I can't really talk about her. And the supporting characters, unbelievable. The supporting characters are great. There's this baby sitter that just is like half a body or in a form of a ghost or spirit. She's awesome as well. There's a weird thing called the Stalk, which I really can't show you. It's explicit, let me just tell you. There's a man named the Will, and he has like his sidekick called the Lying Cat, and he just says lying whenever somebody says a lie. There's Prince Robot the 4th, or I think it's the 4th. I'm really sure it's the 4th. But yeah, even though he's pretty much the bad guy in the story, he does kind of have a likability to him. And finally, we have the grandparents. Now, the grandparents, I'm not going to talk about them that much, because then we'll get to spoiler territory, but let me just say, they're Marco's grandparents, and they're pretty much a first appearance at the end of issue 6, aka the end of the first trade. Now, with all my positives of the series, is there any negatives with the series? Yeah, sad to say, I do have a few problems with the series, and it's not as good as some people say. One, even though let me just say, I love weird. I don't want to be normal. Normal is a curse upon me. Weird is perfect. But then, there's just things that go way too far. Like, seriously, what is this? I need an explanation. What is this? What? Look at that! Look at that! What is that? But, as well, it just kind of, and also, it's very explicit. Now, I think sometimes it works, but most of the time it kind of seems unnecessary. It's not as bad as something like Transmetropolitan, where you just shove it in your face every page. There are a few subtle moments here and there. But a big chunk of the story is devoted to just violence, and that kind of bugs me a bit, because it kind of seems unnecessary. And I'm not one that's against violence in books. I'm not super weak compared to that. In fact, I kind of accept it once in a while, or welcome it, because it kind of makes action scenes more serious or more realistic. But then there's stuff that kind of takes it a little too far. And this kind of went a little too far, but really, it's not entirely bad. And besides those two nitpicks, I'm perfectly fine with this series. But yeah, let's get to the score of this book. Now, in my head, even through this whole review, I've been debating whether to give it one score or another. They're both extremely high. But, as well, it has two solid problems. But luckily, they're minor problems, which still, I can give it a 9 out of 10. This book is cheap enough that I can still recommend you to buy it. It's $10 retail, or I don't know how much that is in other currency, but just search it up. Search it up on a currency translator. It's $10 in US dollars, and it's definitely worth the $10. I paid $9 for it because I bought it off Amazon, but even if you paid the $10 for it, it's still worth it. I highly recommend this book. It has a great story, great characters, great art. It's just great. So that was my review, guys, and I want you guys to, and I want to know what you guys thought of Saga. So leave a comment in the section below and tell me what you guys thought of Saga. So anyway, I'm not gonna ramble anymore. I'm Mega Man Chief Fan, and I'll see you later, guys.